and Transport Legislation Committee. The committee is hearing evidence on the committee's inquiry into the Air Navigation and Civil Aviation Amendment Aircraft Crew Bill 2011 and the Qantas Sale Amendment Still Call Australia Home Bill 2011, and I welcome you all here today. This is a public hearing and a Hansard transcript of the proceedings is being made. Before the committee starts taking evidence, I remind all witnesses that in giving evidence to the committee they are protected by parliamentary privilege. It is unlawful for anyone to threaten or disadvantage a witness on account of evidence given to a committee, and such action may be treated by the Senate as a contempt. It is also a contempt to give false or misleading evidence to a committee. The committee prefers all evidence to be given in public, but under the Senate's resolutions, witnesses have the right to request to be heard in private session. It is important that witnesses give the committee notice if they intend to ask to give evidence in camera. If a witness objects to answering a question, the witness should state the ground upon which the objection is taken, and the committee will determine whether it will insist on an answer having regard to the ground which is claimed. If the committee determines to insist on an answer, a witness may request that the answer be given in camera. Such a request may, of course, also be made at any other time. I would also ask witnesses to remain behind for a few minutes at the conclusion of their evidence in case the Hansard staff need to clarify any terms or references. I remind people in the hearing room to ensure that their mobile phones are either turned off, Senator Heffernan, or switched to silent. Finally, on behalf of the committee, I would like to thank Mr Joyce and Mr Buchanan and Mr Johnson for their cooperation with this inquiry. I welcome Mr Joyce, Mr Buchanan and all representatives from the Qantas Group. For the Hansard record, could you please give your name and the capacity in which you appear today?
Alan Joyce, Chief Executive Officer of the Qantas Group.
Bruce Buchanan, the Chief Executive Officer of the Jetstar Group.
Brett Johnson, the General Counsel of the Qantas Group.
Thank you. You have lodged submission 2 with the committee. Would you like to make any amendments or additions to your submission?
No, Senator.
Okay. I invite you to make a brief opening statement, Mr Joyce, and then the committee will ask questions.
Sure, Senator. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for the opportunity to be here again today. As you know, I've appeared before the committee on the 4th of November last year. I took more than 3 hours of your questions, and since then the Qantas Group has answered more than 20 questions on notice. We've also responded to more than 200 supplementary questions. And just a week ago, we received yet more amendments to the bill, and we responded to them too. We've been very rigorous in responding to all that this committee has put to us. And we have endured examination and insurrections based on politics rather than policy. We have done so for one reason. We have grave fears for the future of Qantas if these legislation proposals come into effect. We want our position clearly understood and on the record because history will judge. The legislation proposed would constitute a major threat to our business, to Australian jobs in the cities and the regions, to investment and to growth. I want to make 3 points before taking your questions. First, the Qantas Sale Act amendments go way beyond the original aims of the legislation and would strangle our capacity to run our business. We all know that the primary purpose of the Qantas Sale Act was to ensure that Qantas remained a majority-owned Australian flag carrier, while pursuing its destiny as a non-government company running its own business and answering to its shareholders. That outcome meant Australian taxpayers had all the benefits of a national airline without bearing the cost. Nothing Qantas is doing is in contradiction of the spirit or the intent of the Act. The government has recently confirmed this. We continue to work hard to secure a viable future for our business, deliver sustainable returns to our shareholders, and fly the flag for Australian jobs and success. These amendments would not increase protection for Qantas. They would not make us more Australian. They would not save or grow Australian jobs. They would have the opposite effect. Senator Xenophon's most recent proposed amendments would have serious and I assume unintended consequences. To take just one example, he wishes to require that a Qantas Group airline such as Jetstar conduct a majority of its heavy maintenance in Australia. Jetstar would then be confronting competitors who enjoy a lower cost base by doing virtually none of the heavy maintenance here in Australia. Those of us running Qantas would then have a choice. Allow Jetstar to fail within the confines of the Qantas Sale Act, or sell it to allow it to succeed outside of the Act. This is a simple statement of the dilemma this legislation would construct. These amendments in total, from the makeup of the Qantas board to the location of our flight training, would apply intrusions and restrictions on the Qantas Group airlines that do not apply to our competitors. If Australians want a truly competitive national carrier, this Parliament cannot tie up Qantas in this way. You would be responsible for making Qantas less competitive just when we most need the freedom to compete. This is not a controversial view. The Secretary of the Department of Infrastructure and Transport, Mr. Mike Murdoch, told you himself that, and I quote, Australian airlines need to continue to have flexibility to adapt their business strategies to the changing market circumstances. He said, the two bills being considered by the committee raise significant issues for the operation of all Australian airlines and their ability to compete internationally. Let me turn to my second point, which relates to the combined impact of the Qantas Sale Act amendments and the Cabin Crew Bill. I note that this is the Standing Committee on Rural Affairs as well as Transport. But the amendments to the Cabin Crew Bill would not preserve Australian jobs. They would destroy them, especially in regional Australia. As you know, for many years now, we've had a liberalised aviation sector with domestic open skies here in Australia. But this has not led to new or sustained international air services by foreign carriers to many of our regional centres. The fact is the Qantas Group network remains critical to maintaining and growing those direct services. And that means as a business, we need to be strong and profitable to retain sufficient scale in our regional, national and international networks. Whenever Qantas Group airlines use foreign crew and Australian crew on the same flights, Australian crew operate under Australian wages and conditions, and foreign-based crews on the terms and conditions of the domicile country, where they are employed and where they live. This is standard practice adopted by airlines all over the world. There are a limited number of routes where this occurs within Australia. We call them tag flights, involving a domestic sector of an international flight primarily servicing Australian regional destinations. These tag flights enable us to serve regional destinations in Australia such as Cairns and Darwin. If the amendments are passed, the international crews are treated as Australians in terms of wages and conditions on domestic legs of international flights. We will no longer be able to viably operate those international services. The proposed amendments would quite simply force the Qantas Group to withdraw services connecting Darwin and Cairns to tourism and trade markets in Asia and in Europe. The impact on regional tourism and development would be immediate and negative. It will result in loss of employment and investment in regional Australia, with flow-on effects for the rural communities who rely on these services in regional centres. Strangling our international business and forcing us to pay uncompetitive wages compared to our foreign airline competition is to no way make us stronger, better or more Australian. The third point I want to make is that we need to be aware of the global and national realities that frame our times. We confront very serious global economic challenges in Europe and the United States. We have warnings of deep downturns from the IMF and the World Bank, and we see daily news of more job losses here in Australia. The reality is simple. We must adapt or die. As Qantas, we want to adapt. We must adapt if we are to survive. We are working very hard to make this company fit, productive and competitive so that we can continue to employ many thousands of Australians, provide great aviation services to our customers and play a vital role in regional and rural Australia. The amendments that this inquiry was set up to examine, if passed, would force the Qantas Group to reduce and withdraw services. And I want it clearly understood that the certain consequence of these bills would be job losses and reduced aviation access. Every state in Australia would be affected. Measures targeting at lowering our competitiveness, closing off us from global markets, and raising our cost base is not patriotic, nor are they smart. Frankly, they are unworkable. Qantas is committed to Australia, to employing Australians, and to growing and investing in Australia. We cannot be constrained by misguided legislation that will achieve precisely the opposite of these aims. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce. Now, I'll just get an indication of who has some questions, because we will manage the time. I have no intentions of keeping our witnesses here all day. We have I think 12:15 finish time, something like that. So is there indication, questions? Okay. Senator Heffernan, if you've got a couple of quick ones, I've certainly got some questions, and I know.
3/4 of an hour?
Well, I'll just ask a couple of questions first before we kick off. Okay, about the same. All right. Well, I'm going to limit the best I can. Okay. Now, just going back, Mr. Joyce, thank you, but from the questions that were taken on notice, and I appreciate the timing that you had 20-odd that came back, your answers, and then there was another 200 which you said in your opening statement. Now, in terms of the questions relating to the amount of rooms that were booked overseas prior to the announcement of the lockout and the shutdown of the airline, you wouldn't provide us with the cost of those rooms, citing, I think, commercial in confidence.
Yes.
Now, after 4 months, surely I would think that where is the commercial in confidence, and could you now provide that figure for us?
Well, we have a deal with brokers both internationally and domestically, Senator, and that the deal about what we buy hotel rooms is commercial in confidence with those brokers. The fundamental, I think, basis of your question, which I think we did answer in the response to them, was when the hotel rooms were actually booked in relation to the 2,800 hotel rooms in Los Angeles and Singapore. We were very clear in our answers that those bookings were made at 5:20 after the announcement of the grounding of the airline. For the international bookings, a call was made to a broker, and at 5:30 for the bookings of the domestic hotels. So in relation to, I think, the initial point, we've been very clear that both of them were made after the grounding. But our terms of purchasing hotel rooms, all of our commercial purchasing power terms are commercial in confidence, and we do have contracts to keep them commercial in confidence.
What we can do, Mr. Joyce, is for the benefit of the committees, we can go into camera.
Yeah.
And then we can seek the questions to our answers in camera.
Well, we're happy to, we have to obviously keep our commercial and confidence contract requirements with the purchase of these hotel rooms. But if you want to go into camera at the later on the session for us to obtain the information and say to them, Senator, if you regard it as that important, we'll give you that information.
Okay. Well, what we'll do is we'll probably, I'm not assuming that you will want to do more in camera, but we'll have that opportunity towards the end of the meeting. It's up to me to manage the time to do that. Okay, in terms of the safety concerns, and I have a number of questions I'd like to put to you.
Chair, can I just raise one very quick point?
Yes.
We may well discuss this at a private meeting, but the issue at the hearings was when the hotel rooms were booked. The actual cost of the hotel rooms, as I understand it, is quite irrelevant to the issue at hand, because the issue at hand was, did Qantas book these rooms before the announcement? That was the big issue at stake, not how much they paid for each room. So unless,
the point is?
Well, why are you seeking to put the committee into a private session to determine what the price of the rooms was when there is no, from what I can gather, dispute as to the actual time the rooms were booked?
Because that was a question from the committee at the previous hearing, Senator Betts, that you were here, and we wish to seek the answer. So, noted. Well, it was asked, and it was noted. Okay, what you've said, Senator